Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 92. My name is NBZ, and it's a very special day for someone on this podcast, because it is in fact the 14th of May, which means George Lucas, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
That would be some guess, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be a kind of a crazy thing. No, Bali, you're here. It's your birthday, which you share with George Lucas.
I do indeed. It's been a good birthday. I even got a Star Wars related gift.
It's
a Stormtrooper helmet decanter, like for your gins and your whiskies and your things like that.
Well, I expect you to be drunk on every show going forward, Bally, because you got to be drinking out this thing.
I'm just going to drink it straight out of the helmet, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm drinking whiskey from a Stormtrooper's helmet. How good does that sound?
Sounds pretty good to me, but we have other things to talk about aside from Stormtroopers' helmets and drinking whiskey. So how about we get on with the show, Bally? What have we got coming up for the rest of this episode?
We are going to talk about what we've been playing. We have some listener emails for the second segment, and then for the third segment, this happens every now and then. There's just a few stories that come out, and we decide to do a bit of a news roundup. So we've got one of those coming up in the third segment.
Grand. We, I think, are getting marching onwards towards E3. It seems like time is slipping away from us.
It's like less than 5 weeks away.
Yeah, we're about a month away. So yeah, it'll be hitting us sooner than we know it. So yeah, we'll have probably more talk about what we're specifically doing around E3 on the next show. But prepare yourselves, because it's coming down. It's happening. So before we do any of that, though, let's just talk about some video games. Bally, you got a video game today, and you've been playing a bunch of it. So how about you tell us about that?
Yeah, so other than the Stormtrooper decanter that Caroline got me, she also picked up 1-2 Switch for the Nintendo Switch, of course, which, like...
That's crazy.
Is a game that I really, really wanted to experience. Like, it's
the sort of game where you're like, I don't want to spend my money on that, but if someone gives it to me, that would be pretty good.
Well, yeah, and it kind of became that situation, which is perfect. So I've been playing quite a bit of 1-2 Switch today. I've also been playing Zelda. I'm going to talk about that later. I've also been playing Thomas Was Alone, which I'm going to talk about next time. But yeah, 1-2 Switch that for the time being. That is a really great game, and it really demonstrates what the Joy-Con can do. Now, I've not played every single one of the games, but I've played most of them. So I've sort of experienced the majority of that game, I'd say, already. Which, I mean, one of the criticisms of the game is that it's very short. There's very few modes. There's not really a ton of games, but what the game does have, it does very well, I feel. So
set up the structure for me then, because I know that you don't get everything out of the box. You can't just go to a menu and pick what game you want to play. Like, the game necessitates you unlock stuff. So is there a single player mode you go through, or what's the kind of setup they have?
It's weird, because the second you click on the game, if you have your two Joy-Con in the Joy-Con grip, like I normally do, immediately they desync and become 1 and 2 player without you doing anything. Like, the game just puts your Joy-Con into that mode, which is quite cool. So I took the player 1 Joy-Con, Caroline took player 2, and then it goes straight into the quick draw, the standard quick draw game. And then so you play that game, and then I think it like systematically goes to the next game, and I think you play like 3, 4, 5 games, and then it goes, well done, you've unlocked all the games, and then all the games are unlocked, and you can go through all the games manually and play them one by one. Or there's another 2
So you
modes.
don't actually need to play through all of them as it gives you them. You're playing through like a few, and then it gives you the keys
play like
to the kingdom.
5 or 6, and then bam, you get all of them.
Cool.
Which is nice, because we've just sort of like picked the ones that sound interesting and have tried them out. And there's quite a few games that are quite tiring and like jumping about, and you're like, I don't really want to jump about constantly. I'd like to play one of them.
I feel like there are a lot of games in there which are akin to how Just Dance works, or how like a lot of these Wii games worked, where what you're doing seems to be way more precise and specific than what the game can track. So like there's the one that I watched when Giant Bomb were doing a kind of quick look of this, where Drew was like doing this catwalk dancing thing, right? And to me, I don't think that Right, but I don't think the Switch can really track that specifically. So it seems like you're kind of going over the top. Again, with the pose one, where you're like posing, one person does a pose, and the other person has to copy it. I don't think that there's that good like recognition, because obviously it can't see the entire pose. It can just see where your arm is or where the controller is relative to the other one, right?
Right.
So I wonder that it's a little bit, over the top in some of those elements. It can't actually specifically track it.
You have to definitely put your heart into it with things like that and go for it. But it is actually very, very, very good at tracking and identifying the angle which you're holding it, where you're holding it, the impact on it. So, for example, there's a gorilla one, which is similar to the dance one, where you hear like a beat, and then you have to like copy the beat by beating your chest. And then obviously for like health and safety, they don't want you actually beating your chest. But Caroline like whapped it right against her chest, and then all of a sudden the game's just like, can you please not hit it against your chest? Like that's not like, don't do that. Like so it like knew that she'd hit it against her chest,
right?
And then like, so there's little intricate things like that where the game constantly knows where the Joy-Con are. Like like with the shooting one, like if you're just like pressing the trigger just to practice, it's just like, oh, keep your finger off the trigger, or like it'll say, oh, make sure you point your thing at the ground, make sure you do this. Like it just feels a bit more all in sync than a Wii remote would. But having said that, I have had some issues with, there's like a shaving mini game where you basically sync it by pressing the button on your chin, and then you're moving it like a razor around your face. And some of the tracking is, you have to really sort of exaggerate the shaver movement. Like you can't use it legitimately like a proper razor. Like you have to be a bit more elaborate. But it still works well in that sense. It's not exactly like a razor would be. But there's a whole bunch of games, and
are there any that have been standing out to you as particularly better than the others?
My two favorites, or my favorite, I think, is definitely the best use of HD Rumble, and that is the ball game. I can't remember the names of these games. The ball
Count
game,
the ball or something.
You have a your Joy-Con becomes a wooden box, and inside the wooden box are virtual metal balls, and using the HD Rumble in the Joy-Con, you have to rotate your virtual box and work out how many virtual metal balls are in your Joy-Con. And on paper, it sounds like, right, how on earth do they do that? Like, what does that feel like? And you can like feel and hear all the little motors in the Joy-Con working, but they all really genuinely work in sync, and it works perfectly, because if you just slightly tilt the Joy-Con just so that you can get all the balls in a line, and you're simply just letting them hit one of the corners of the box, you can just count the number of like jolts that you're feeling, and it'll give you the number. Like you'll nail it every time, as long as you have the right technique.
So it's accurate enough in order for you to actually nail it every time, is what you're saying.
Definitely. And I think that a new player going into that game might like shake it about a bit and struggle, but the second you've got it, and we picked up pretty quickly, like it's quite hard to get it wrong. But having said that, the numbers of balls range from like 2 to 8 or 9 or 10, I believe. The highest number we had was like 7, I think. But you can literally hear like 7 balls just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as long as you're tilting it slowly enough. Like it's really impressive technology.
I think the cool thing about that game is, after you have made your decision and you kind of set it down, it shows you the box after the game is complete, so you can kind of move it and see the balls moving. I think one thing that people have said is, when they see the box, the balls are way smaller than they think they were. Like they're like these tiny little things, as opposed to like large metal balls that you would imagine.
I think trying to visualize them as very small and very heavy is maybe the best idea, because perhaps the weight can confuse you to thinking that they're bigger than they actually are. But that little bit at the end is actually really good, just for training and identifying like that little sense of the ball's hitting just the side of the box when
Yeah.
you tilt it. So that's definitely a great game. I really enjoy the game where you have a treasure chest that is coiled up in chains, and you imagine the treasure chest as the Joy-Con, and you're rotating the Joy-Con to unravel the chain, essentially. And you're turning it upside down in all different angles to race your partner to unravel this. And that's a really fun game. It's very simple, but it works well. Like it's a really.
Is
good use
there
of the
HD
gyro.
rumble going on there as well? I imagine with like the strings attaching.
I think there is, but it's not obviously as important or noticeable as the ball game. But
Right.
it's good. No, it's cool.
Quick question: were you playing with the wrist strap on, or do you have to take it off? Because I remember during that Giant Bomb Quick Look that they were like taking it off for some games, having it on for others. Were you using it the whole time, or?
Yeah, it's on and off quite a lot. So for the treasure chest one,
Because I mean, like for Milk, you have to basically have it on because I think the buttons are way too small if you're going to
for Milk, yeah,
be doing
that's
game.
also a very good game. I really enjoy that. Yeah, the game constantly tells you take it off, put it on, take it off, put it on. It's like it almost feels like a different variable for every single game, which can get a little frustrating. We've definitely been sliding the wrist straps on and off quite a lot.
Okay.
And maybe I'm a bit overprotective of my Joy-Con, but they are 80 quid to get new ones.
Exactly.
So
it's not cheap tech.
You don't want to like lob it across the room just from your thumping your chest like a gorilla or something. So it's not.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, look, Bally, as someone who has experience lobbing Wii remotes at Windows,
Yes.
I understand that you have concerns.
Someone
for
who
sure.
likes to get involved in their video games and chuck a Wiimote across your living room into your window.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely can say wrist straps are important.
They're very important.
Having said that, I was wearing a wrist strap.
Yeah, exactly. The irony is you were wearing the wrist strap. It's just the force was so great that it snapped the string.
It just snapped.
So,
yeah.
there you
And then
go.
a few months after that, they like released the thicker, more powerful wrist
The condom.
straps. And the condoms, of course.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
But I'm having a really good time with 1-2 Switch. We've just been doing the two of us, 2 players today, but I hope to like perhaps next weekend or something like invite a few friends around and try and do a party atmosphere, because one of the modes is like team mode where you basically have two
It's like a
teams of
board
people.
game mode, right? And I think that's the thing that Giant Bomb did.
So you got 2 teams that I think it can go up to something like 8 players or something, like four people per team.
You can probably do as many players as you want, right? Because it's just rotating.
Yeah, so just like rotating, and you're saying, oh, this team won, that team won, and it could be a bit of fun. And so I'm excited to try it in that environment. And the cool thing is I do like the idea where the game encourages you to not look at the screen. Like it feels very weird on games like perhaps table tennis, or there's a game where I'm sure everyone's seen from trailers and things where you have like a wooden sword that you're bringing down on your opponent's head, and your opponent has to catch the sword in their hands. That these games, like, they encourage you to, like, all the games pretty much encourage you to look at each other.
Right, using the sound basically to indicate things.
And using the sound. And it's not just the sound. Something like the HD rumble really comes into its own with the milking game, for example, where you look at the screen briefly, and it'll give you like a visual indicator of the flow of milk coming out the udder, like, so you can see the milk. But you just need to look. Perhaps looking at the screen is helpful at the start with that, because it's about watching and feeling. Because the HD rumble goes wild when you get a really good like squeeze on an udder. Like if you get a really good thrust.
Keep telling me about squeezing.
I'm
these
struggling to describe this in his head. I'm running out of words.
No.
When you get a really good
thrust
of that udder.
Oh yeah.
You get a good stream going. That's when you know that, like,
that's when you know
you're filling up
the magic's happened.
That's when
it's one of those things that I definitely noticed when people were playing it in demos, that there were people who were like, I don't really know how are you doing it better, and it seems a rhythmical thing. Like you need to nail down the button presses.
It's the way you're pressing the buttons. It's the speed with which. It's really like there's so many dimensions to how you can do that other game that like it's a genuine technique, I would argue. Like it takes a while to get like a good skill, I'd say, in that game.
So a lot of these games are very motion control driven. Have you felt that this is a step up from the Wii Remote, or even Remote Plus, or Motion Plus, should I say? And has it given you more confidence in, say, the motion controls of something like ARMS?
Yeah, definitely. I think stuff like the shaving and the calibration of knowing where it is on your face is maybe I'm being overly harsh, but it wasn't great on that. And like I said, you had to exaggerate. But everything else, like, it just knows exactly where the Joy-Con is and what it's doing. And that is just really cool. Combined with the HD rumble, I'm pretty confident ARMS will have some really, really, like, not realistic, that's the wrong word, but very accurate controls. Like, I would feel confident for that. Like, I think it works well.
Cool.
Yeah,
I mean, there's aside from that party mode and kind of just picking random mini games, there's not a lot more to 1-2 Switch.
Right.
There's
there's two modes. There's two modes. All the games are listed in like 30 games. 28 of the 28 games, and the other two games, as it were, are the two modes. And the two modes are, one's a party game and one's like a head-to-head, I believe. So it's just like, we've not actually done either of those. We've just been picking the ones we fancy. But
yeah, just going through.
I'm intrigued to test out those party modes, but I'm glad I have something where I can say, I now have Zelda and 1-2 Switch. I can say, look, this is a crazy open, to some stranger who's not playing the Switch, I can say, look, here's a crazy ass open world game. Have a run around as Link, perhaps, experience that. But then actually this system does this other crazy thing. Grab a Joy-Con, get out 1-2 Switch and give it a go, because it's just a really and I know that when this game was unveiled, everyone was a bit skeptical and were like, oh, Nintendo going back to motion controls. And I feel that, and this game is overpriced for what it is, but there's no denying that there's a hell of a lot of polish in this game, and it oozes with what Nintendo do best, which is just innovative, unusual, fun, essentially.
Yeah,
and it does that really well. So like, I'm pleased with it. It's great. I'm gonna hopefully try out a party environment, and I'll check back in when I've managed to do that.
With your findings. Very important. I look forward to us giving it a go at some point down the line. I'd like to try it out.
Maybe get a video on the go or something.
Maybe, we could do that. It could be quite fun. Absolutely. So you've been, you're playing some other things, but still, we'll wait until you're a bit further in those. Zelda,
Indeed.
The Never-Ending Train, of course.
Indeed.
Oh boy. So I, Bally, have been, obviously I've been busy, doing revising and things as well. But a couple of short, small things. One not very short thing. I beat Persona 5, so that happened. It only took me 90 hours, but the majority of that 90 hours was spent in like 1 week before I'd even started revising. So it was just a process of like in the evenings going through and eventually finishing off. And it is a tremendous game. It is absolutely impeccable. And I have problems with it for sure. I definitely think that in terms of characterization, it's not as strong for me as Persona 4 is. And I think the story definitely doesn't have the same twists and turns and kind of intriguing elements to it as 4 did. And so for me, kind of that emotional heart still is kind of king. And I think that, 4 Golden remains, I think, probably my preferable game over this. But I think when you're talking about it in terms of, hey, this is a video game, there are so many things that it does better than its predecessor. And it's just one thing that I haven't talked about enough, but I think I've been subtly suggesting through the past 3 episodes, is that this game has a fucking killer soundtrack. It is damn awesome, and I have, been using those songs as breaks between segments, and hope that the listeners have been enjoying those, because I think that it's a very kind of jazzy soundtrack. It's very kind of different from a lot of stuff that I kind of listen to myself, and also that I think turns up in video games, but it is incredibly get stuck in your head very easily. And Persona 4 had a lot of stuff like that as well, but Persona 4 was much more kind of J-poppy anime, which I like too, but this has a kind of a class to it, and yeah, it's definitely something that I have to point out as a big point in that game. But I finished it. I think it's very good, and you should probably play it if you like Persona. So there you go. Aside from that, I started and finished a game within like an hour or so. This game is called Flower. It's made by that game company who made Journey, and this is the game they made before Journey. And it's very similar in a lot of aspects. It's a very cerebral, kind of peaceful game. You essentially play the part of a flower petal who kind of just flows through the wind, and this is a very motion control heavy game, which I wasn't expecting. I knew that Journey had some like light motion control stuff for moving cameras, things here and there, but this game is almost essentially motion controls and one button, to the point where it felt a little weird because
what did you play this on
on PS4. This is originally a PlayStation 3 game, but it was remastered. I think Journey and this were both remastered for PS4, and it was in a sale for like £2 or something. I've heard about it for years. I just haven't checked it out. But it really tells me that the motion control in the DualShock and generally Sony's motion control stuff just not as good as Nintendo's. It just feels less free and less kind of malleable. In a sense, like trying to turn corners and move in the direction I wanted to felt like a bit of a drag at some points. It was annoying me at the start because I'm kind of getting used to it, but you do, you settle in, and it's basically holding down one button to kind of move the wind to push you forward, and then you're kind of rotating the controller. But the weird thing is you're not really doing anything with the second hand, so I felt myself like holding the right side of the controller and holding X and kind of just moving it at angles specifically and like letting go to slow down and get corners and things like that. It was weird because kind of like the stuff that happens with Brothers is like when you don't have one hand doing something, there's kind of disconnect going on. But it's a very beautiful game. It's essentially, the idea is you're kind of bringing color back to this barren world. There are these kind of industrial landscapes that you're kind of repopulating by taking your flower petals and moving them over different kind of outcroppings of grass and flower landscapes. And as soon as you pass by them, like stuff around kind of springs back and paint kind of covers them, and the life returns essentially. And so it's just this very kind of peaceful, you can just sit down, do it in one sitting, and just there's like 5 or 6 levels. Very calming, very nice. It was very good while I was, in a revision period, have exams coming up to just kind of relax me, It actually helped
like
quite a
mental break.
Yeah, totally. And, I think a lot of people, some people are very contemptuous towards these types of games, the kind of, art video games, as it were, where there's not too much to them mechanically. But I really enjoy those experiences, and especially when they're kind of brief, not too elongated. It's something that I can totally appreciate. So, if have a PS4, I think I'm not sure if it's still on sale. It probably isn't because I got it a while ago, but it's worth checking out for sure for just an afternoon, just sitting there and enjoying.
Do you think games like that will eventually make it to Switch? Maybe not that game specifically, but games like it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those games are the kind of independent stuff that I think Switch can now cater to in a way that the Wii U wouldn't, not only because it didn't have the install base, but, Nintendo weren't. They were doing some indie reach out, but it definitely wasn't as strong as it is right now. So, I can imagine something like Gone Home appearing on Switch, where before I wasn't too sure if that would be there. So, it's definitely a possibility. This game wouldn't because this is published by Sony, so it's not leaving their platform. But
right, yeah.
I absolutely think that there's a place there on Switch, and I think this game having motion controls would actually work perfectly with that system. So it sounds good, and maybe we'll get stuff like this in the future. So Flower is neat. You should check that out. And then the other game that I've just started is the follow-up to one of the best games of the last decade, as decided by me and you, apparently, Guacamelee. It's not a direct sequel or anything to do with it at all. It's just the next game from that studio,
Similar art style.
Very similar art style, yeah. It's called Severed. And this is a game that was talked about a while ago because it came out last year. It came out first on the Vita. When I was listening to PS I Love You, Greg Miller's PlayStation podcast that is now defunct with the whole Colin Moriarty leaving business. But that was a game they talked about a great deal because it was one of the last big Vita games that came out of any significance, and they really loved it. And I found it interesting because this game fundamentally is something that I've never really had an interest in before. It's a first-person dungeon crawler, and it is entirely touchscreen based, so you're kind of fighting enemies by using the touchscreen. And from that perspective, I'm like, I don't know if this is something I'd be interested in, but as someone who has been a fan of Drinkbox and the games they make, I played Mutant Blob's Attack, which was the game they made before Guacamelee, on my Vita, because I think I got it free when I initially got the system, and that's a really fun, weird, cool game, which has some kind of Katamari Damacy influences going on in there. And then obviously Guacamelee is tremendous, and we both love that. So going into this, I'm keeping an open mind because Drinkbox have only made things I love, and you need to play this game, Bally. It's really, really good.
Oh, really?
I'm
on
maybe
3DS
about
and Wii U, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. I hope they bring it to Switch, although, having said that, I may have an issue with them bringing it to Switch for some specific reasons I'll talk about in a second. But it's I'm probably about halfway through, and it is incredibly fun, very engaging, and totally different from anything I've played before. Not just because it's a dungeon crawler, but because the mechanics it lays out are very unique, and it uses motion control in a way that isn't spammy, isn't like, it's very accurate, and it's very thoughtful. So the premise is, you're this girl, and her family has been, taken away or presumed murdered or something along those lines, and she's going on this journey to recover them. And as she goes through this quest along these dungeons, she comes across these different enemies, and the enemies can be defeated by using the touchscreen. And it reminds me to some extent of Skyward Sword, because they will be blocking parts of themselves sometimes, so you can only hit them from the right, and then they'll change their pattern back. And as you go, you're very much encouraged to not spam, because if you spam, you lose the focus meter. Once the focus meter is kind of built up, if you kill an enemy, it goes into this kind of slow motion mode where you can cut off their limbs, and that's kind of the premise behind Severed, is like you're upgrading your character by using the limbs you've cut off your enemies. So if you're spamming a bunch, you're never going to fill up your focus meter, and as a result, you're not going to get a lot of body parts with which you can use to get better stats for your kind of character to build over the game. So it encourages you to be like, okay, this enemy is blocking me, so I need to wait until it opens up for attack, then I attack and go for it. It also differentiates between long swipes and short swipes. So you can do a bunch of really short ones, but the damage will be much less than if you do like one single long swipe. It's the difference between like, say, 4 damage and 18 damage. So it's pretty significant. So there's a lot of, hey, how am I going to get through this situation? Maybe I should take it a bit more slowly. But then they introduced the idea of having multiple enemies on screen at once. So you're kind of flicking between them, and it's very good with its UI design, where on the bottom of the screen you see these different circles that represent each enemy, and as they are filling up to attack you, you see a yellow bar filling up essentially. So if an enemy's behind you and it's going to attack you, you're like, okay, I need to switch my priorities, go to that enemy and stop it before it attacks me. So you have to rebut its attacks or block it or whatever. But it becomes this really micromanagey, very intense thing where you might have 4 enemies, all of different types, some of which fill up faster than others, some of which have attacks that you can block, some of which have abilities that you can steal from them. And there's I just finished playing the other night, and there was one battle I was going through that was really difficult, that I was having to juggle all these enemies. It was very challenging and really satisfying, and the motion controls work superbly well. On Wii U, it probably would work better because of the stylus, so you have that more kind of precision-based thing. And 3DS as well, I guess.
Your finger on the Vita's touchscreen.
Yeah, and I think the Vita has a really good touchscreen, so it works well. But there is that kind of thing, and this is my problem with them bringing it to Switch potentially, is when I'm holding the Vita, and this happened while I was playing, I'm only holding it with my left hand, right? And so my right hand is going crazy, like swiping and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cramping my hand a little bit. But there was one moment where I flicked it so hard that the Vita like sprung out my hand and went sprawling across, hit my keyboard, hit the space bar on my keyboard, so it paused the video I was watching at the same time. It was this goddamn mess. But it's one of those things where it's probably my fault for just being an idiot and not holding my system properly. But the other thing I feel is holding the Switch with one hand doesn't sound great to me, especially because it's quite a heavy device. And so, like, if you also the Joy-Cons on the side they're secured, but I have felt like they can rock back and forth, on the rail.
Yeah, you're right.
So if you're holding it in one hand and applying that pressure onto the Joy-Con, I don't know, like it feels like I would love to have it on that platform, but also maybe not. It's one of those things where I think this game was brought to iOS, so you could do total touchscreen controls. At the moment, on the Vita, I can use the analog stick to move forward and navigate the dungeon, which I actually really like because I don't want to do that on a touchscreen. But I could see the potential of them adding all the touchscreen-only features to the Switch version for fear of some idiot throwing their Switch accidentally.
I mean, something like the Wii U gamepad, if you just feel it ergonomically, it just feels a lot better holding it with a single left hand, for example.
Right.
With your right hand using the touchscry. So, and
I mean, that's how I played most of Mario Maker was, doing that because you had to create stuff on the touchscreen.
I'd worry that the 3DS version was like changed in some way to fit the dual screens, or I don't know, like I presume the Wii U version and Vita version are far more similar.
Yeah, I would think so. And I'm interested. I think the Wii U version, you probably have to just play it on the gamepad. I wouldn't imagine there's any way of doing it on the TV. I think what they might do is they might do, like you've said with some other games where they have the map screen, but this time it's inverted. So the map screen would be on the television as opposed to the gamepad.
Right.
So you can kind of see stuff going on. And that's another thing that I like about it. It feels very Metroid-y because it has the kind of traditional Metroid tile layout in terms of, rooms you visited and things like that. So even though it's in first person, I always have a good sense of where I am and where I'm going. So I appreciate that. So you can just tap that in the top corner to see the map, which is great. And, visually it's really creative. It is a first person game, but when you move from one area to the other, it's not like your character is in a rendered world that they're moving through. It's like they've created these art pieces for each section, and as you move forward, you don't necessarily move forward so much as you kind of blend into a new area, and it's it's interesting how they've used their 2D artwork to create a 3D space, because you can like rotate your character around each square and see like pots on the floor that you can break to get monster pieces and stuff, and just environmental things. But all the art is in 2D, but it's presented as a 3D game, and I just thought it's a smart way of getting around that problem when they have traditionally in the past been a studio that hasn't done any kind of 3D work, and it works very well. So yeah, as I said, I'm like 3 hours in maybe. So it's supposedly not a very long game, maybe 5 or 6. But I strongly recommend that you check this out at some point, Bally, because Drinkbox are a fantastic studio and they make some really creative things. And this is just another one in their bowstring. So I'm looking forward to finishing it off. But so far, really, really grabbed me. I think it's awesome. So, that's going to be it for the first segment. Don't go anywhere, though, because we'll be right back after this break talking about some of your emails. Be back in a sec.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. It is that time. It's that time for listener emails. It's a little bit of a compressed show this week, just running out of time. So we've only got a couple to run through. But before I get on to the first email, I should say the email address, which of course is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Please send in your emails. We always need more. We say that a lot, but it's always true. So our first email is from James, who's from Vancouver, Canada. Hi guys, quick question for you. I'm very interested in becoming a Switch owner. However, I do not feel like the current iteration of the Switch is something I'm convinced I'm going to pick up. The battery life could be better, and there are a few design flaws, such as kickstand charging problem, that have made me convinced Nintendo will release a redesigned version that remedies these problems and improves on the current version. Nintendo always releases several versions of the same console, but the question is when? How long do you both believe it will be before Nintendo offers a new model of the Switch? What do you think they will change, improve on with a new version? Given the success of the Switch at this point and the fact it only recently came out, I'd be surprised if it were released until 2019 at the earliest. Hopefully you guys can enlighten me to your thoughts, as you definitely have a more vast knowledge of the way Nintendo works than I do. Keep it up, James.
Well, thank you, James, for the email. I don't know we have that much of a vast knowledge of the way Nintendo works, but we try and...
We just get our information the same place everyone else does.
Well, yeah, I guess. But we try and, extrapolate those thoughts to some degree. So this is interesting about it because I think fundamentally the thing with Switch is Nintendo have marketed it and positioned it not as a handheld but as a console. So if we're looking at the lineage of their console, their home stuff, then there really isn't a tradition of iteration at all. So that's the one thing I first wonder is whether, because they view it from that perspective, they would do that. Do you think that they are so solid in their thinking that, you know, they want this to be the home console and therefore they don't want to iterate on it?
I think they will iterate because while, of course, it is a home console, I think that when you have... there are flaws with the Switch. I think it's impossible to ignore them. Like... stuff with the kickstand is very weak in and of itself. You can't charge the system while it's being used.
It's not only that, the kickstand gives you a horrible viewing angle. Like,
it gives you a horrible viewing angle.
Which, if you're a child, it's fine because you're short enough to see the screen there. But like your traditional case for an iPad or anything to that degree, it always has a tilt angle which is relevant to the way you look down at a screen from a height. And
right.
The Switch doesn't do that at all. Like, you have to really put it quite far back in order to get it that way. So yeah, it's not just that the kickstand, has problems for charging. It's that the angle is straight up bad. So
yeah, there are numerous flaws that have been made well clear on the internet, and it's important that any iteration on the Switch does improve on all those flaws, and I think that it will come because the battery is it is not good. It's really not good at all. And I think the Switch in its current iteration will sell really well, and as a result, it will be a very long time before I think there is any change. But having said that, you can't not think about Joy-Con and what they're going to do to innovate around that, and like, will there be a D-pad Joy-Con? Will there be like GameCube controller Joy-Con that lots of people have mentioned? I don't think there's the technology where Joy-Con could act as a battery booster, but that would certainly be something that would interest a lot of people, I'm sure, where you could just have like lithium batteries inside your Joy-Con that power the system itself. I don't know, but I think there's iterations to come.
We could have a Theseus's ship situation on our hand. Alternatively, if you want a more relevant pop culture reference, Triggers.
What
Triggers
was that reference?
Wherein the idea is that you have this thing which is comprised of multiple parts, and over the years, both versions of those parts are swapped out. So Trigger on Only Fools and Horses has this broom, and they're celebrating he's had it for this long time, but the broom has had like 7 different handles and 5 different brushes, so it's not the same broom, right. It's a completely different broom, right? And that is how I look at the Switch, because it is comprised of the Joy-Con plus the screen itself, right? So if there is iteration on the Joy-Con, that's one element that gets progressed, as opposed to the Switch hardware itself, where you would take, the physical thing and give it a better screen, give it something that lasts longer battery-wise. Like, eventually you'll get to a point, maybe Nintendo has subtly done these releases as opposed to overtly done them. I think sometimes there were some iterations of the Wii, for example. There was the Wii Mini, which came out in Canada and in the UK, really weird product that didn't have any internet connectivity and stuff like that. So I think there is some stuff in the past where they have iterated on their previous home consoles, but the Switch, I guess, is a unique situation where you can kind of swap it about and do different things. And we've already seen there are different solutions for the Joy-Con battery, which they added. I think that was during recent Nintendo Direct when they were saying, hey, for ARMS, we're going to add this battery extender to the Joy-Con, and everyone's like, why don't you just add a battery extender to the Switch itself? The Joy-Con has pretty good life in it, whereas the main unit
technology
doesn't.
There where a Joy-Con could power the main tablet part? Is that possible? Do we know?
I really don't think that is. If you take a look at how some people are experiencing issues even with portable chargers, where they're saying the portable charger is not enough to basically give it the juice. The Switch still drains, albeit slowly, but it still drains while it's plugged into the portable charger. So if something that is dedicated to charging can't help the Switch, there's no fucking way the Joy-Cons can. It's definitely an inverted relationship where the Switch is charging them. That's what's going on there. But I don't know, if we look back at the iterations of, say, 3DS, DS, Game Boy, going all the way back, I feel like it's usually about a 2 to 3 year gap before they introduce a new version. So I guess his bet of 2019, I would say probably middle to late 2019, is probably correct if they were to do this, right?
And Nintendo handhelds are successful, so we're basing sort of that, I guess, those 2 years based on that the Switch is broadly successful, like almost all Nintendo handhelds have been. So what I think is interesting is that the size of the Switch, and it's a very simple transition, but it's easy for them to say there's a potential market for making a smaller Switch, and there's also a potential market for making a larger Switch. And I could imagine iterations potentially going both ways on that. And that'd be interesting to see. Well, I'd personally love the idea of a big one, but that's just me because I do like carrying it around in a bag. But there's lots of things you can do with a handheld to mix it up that you can't necessarily do with a home console, and that's where the Switch is unique compared to other home consoles, because the portable element is so crucial.
Yeah, it is it's central to its design, so it has to be a factor when they're considering what they're going to do moving forward. And I think a lot of people have brought up the point that there is potential to make a smaller Switch, or even to make a Switch that is just the dock, not the dock, it's without any power obviously, but a box traditionally like a PS4 or an Xbox One, which I don't know how that would work, because the problem with the way they position Switch in the marketing is the entire name is built around the concept of going from one to the other. And so if you have an iteration, if you have an iteration which can't execute on the marketing concept, then what the hell are you doing? But then again, you take a look at the entire prospect of the 2DS, and you can kind of throw that out the window, right? Because Nintendo's whole marketing push for the 3DS was 3D, and then they literally just remove it from one product. It's possible that they do that thing, but I don't know. The idea of a small Switch, to me, I don't know if it's more likely that they iterate on this Switch and make a better one with longer battery life and with Joy-Cons that are more sturdy on the screen, or something to that degree, or whether they go with something which is lighter, smaller, easier to carry around. But then you have the issue of compatibility, right? Because I don't think you'd be able to attach Joy-Cons to a smaller one in the same way. Either you'd have to have even smaller Joy-Cons, or you'd have to have it so that it doesn't have anything detaching from it whatsoever, which again puts us back in the problem of, hey, it's not switching anymore. So I think it's a complicated issue, but ultimately how well Switch does will indicate, what direction they go in. And I think what the market wants is something that they do pay attention to. So we'll see.
Should James buy now?
Yeah, that is the question. And honestly, no, I don't think, like, the thing with...
We're just suckers for Zelda and new stuff.
Yeah, but like, I literally, after beating Zelda, which I spent 100 hours in and absolutely loved, I pick up my Switch every day and look at it, and I'm like, one day I'll play something on you. And I know a lot of people have been saying there's loads of stuff to play because there are all these indies coming out, but for me, as someone who owns a PC, a lot of those games are coming out there. A lot of them are much cheaper there, and I know they're going to go down in price quicker there. There have been technical issues, as we talked on the last episode about Snake Pass and Mr. Shifty and stuff, so I haven't felt the need to invest in anything else yet because there haven't been big enough exclusive, like, good things that I want just on the Switch alone. But I don't know, it's a weird question to ask because I think a lot of people ask, like, well, should I buy this now or should I not? And it's when someone usually sends that into a podcast, I'm usually like, well, you know, you can make that decision yourself based on your own taste, right? If you look at that lineup and think, hey, these are the games that I want and this is the stuff that I care about, then yeah, it's worth it for you to go for that. But if it's not compelling enough and you have these misgivings, which are fair misgivings, with the battery life being flawed and the design stuff happening, it makes sense that you would hold off. But the question is, how long can you hold off for, right? Because do you want to be part of the conversation when Mario Odyssey comes out? Or do you want to be part of the conversation when a new Metroid comes out, potentially before 2019 and an iteration? And that's kind of where you need to position yourself.
We're so close to E3 that you should definitely wait until then at least, James, because that's going to line up what's coming out in 2017 mainly, and whether a Switch is of interest this year, if not the next. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So our next email is from Vinny, who's from Brazil. And I should say this email's a little old, but he mentions, in the last episode of the podcast, you were talking about how expensive Nintendo products were in the US and how it's more expensive in the UK and maybe Australia. Just to give you some perspective on maybe how lucky you are. I live in Brazil, and you don't know how difficult being a Nintendo fan is here. First of all, Nintendo have never ever officially supported the local market here, at least not directly. For brief moments since the 90s, they partnered with a local company to represent them, but that was very minimal. No games in Portuguese, no Nintendo Club or anything like that, and the prices never dropped when compared to grey market. Are you living in Brazil and want Nintendo products? The grey market is the way to go. I've just checked prices on Nintendo products. Here you have the best prices I found. So the Nintendo Switch is 2,499 real, which is Brazilian currency, which is 604 British pounds. Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is 289 real or 75 British pounds, or the Wii U Deluxe, which is 1,299 real or 338 British pounds. When Nintendo had partners here, the prices were not that different. They blame our tax system, but Sony and Microsoft found their way in, and their products are cheaper than Nintendo's. It gets much more interesting when you know how much is the minimum wage around here, 229 British pounds. I'm not going to lie, someone who lives on minimum wage would never buy any console unless it's a kid who works and gets all the money for himself, not paying any bills at home. The average salary for a grown-up who has a family is 572 British pounds. Like the quote from 500 Days of Summer, Nintendo took a giant shit on my face, literally. Did I give you some perspective on how lucky maybe you are? I'm not saying products are cheap in the UK, and I'm not saying your complaints are first world problems. There's no such things. Problems are problems anywhere, despite how things are somewhere else. I hope you understand that. Cheers and keep up the good work, Vinny.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, for this email. It's very enlightening and very interesting. And obviously, you know, us complaining here is certainly nothing compared to the situation that you have in Brazil. It's crazy that it is that expensive and that happens over there. And I think there was some stuff, I think he mentions it in the email, but Nintendo kind of pulled out from Brazil. I remember there being a news story about that, and their products not being sold there officially by them anymore, which is why they have to go through, these kind of not so legal channels, I guess you would say. But yeah, I certainly think that, we don't have enough perspective on these other parts of the world in which video games are sold and how they do. And I think it's very interesting to learn about that stuff for sure, because I think especially with the market being so Americentric and also video games basically being talked about only within the regions of the US, Europe, and Japan, essentially. Like, those are the three hubs of where video games
and Australia gets
are
a mention
discussed
every now and then, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, as he kind of alluded to, Australia gets a mention when we're talking about prices, because we know that they kind of get screwed on that stuff as well. But yeah, aside from that, it's something that, you know, video games are everywhere, and they are slowly becoming a big thing in certain countries. I know China's, you know, a burgeoning market right now. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear, you know, the issues that people face and why games may have problems in places like Brazil. I mean, £600 for a Switch, especially when, you know, you compare that to the earnings, is absurd, right?
Exactly. And is this just maybe another example of Nintendo misunderstanding a market outside of Japan? Or is that too general a statement to make? I
don't know. I think there are probably like a lot of factors, like financial factors, that go on behind the scenes here. Yeah, I wouldn't like put it out there and say they don't really know what they're doing. Although Nintendo, most of the time, people like to say have no idea what they're doing, but that's just, you know, just the internet deciding. So
it certainly puts into perspective. Like I do think totally. When you're from the UK and a new video game console comes out and you just like, right, let's pick it up day one. That's that. Moaning about, I don't know, what do we moan about? We moan about all sorts of things. Release dates. That's a big one. That's
the major one. Hey, right. Do you know Spectre of Torment still not out on 3DS in Europe? Still waiting for that.
It's out on like Wii U today, isn't it? I need to check that out.
Yeah. So you've got access to that now.
That's
so
weird,
great times,
isn't it? Anyway,
it is. So,
yeah. But when you compare it to like, would I rather have my Switch a bit late, or would you rather just double the price of the whole thing? I think I'd definitely take it a bit late. So I totally get that. It's like we beat about the bush, I should say, with this, but video games are definitely a huge luxury, and they are. While in some senses access to many video games is getting cheaper, at that high end of buying the new AAA games on launch is not getting any cheaper, and it's an expensive hobby, and you just gotta appreciate it for what it is and accept that, like, you know, it's not universal, and we invest a lot of money to get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and that's something that we sort of have dedicated to, I guess.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, thank you, Vinny, for that perspective. Very appreciated. And I think that's gonna close out our shorter email segment this week. But Bally, you can tell people where they can send more emails, because we actually do need emails. It's really important.
Please send more emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We would greatly appreciate that. So, on that is the end of the second segment. Join us in the third segment, where we will be catching up on some news.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the show. With our final segment, we're going to wrap up some news, because there have been some significant things coming out of Nintendo of late, and it would probably be a good idea to touch base on those, give you our thoughts on some things that have been announced. So I think the big bombshell that kind of came out of nowhere, Bally, was the new Nintendo 2DS XL, which I believe one morning there was just a YouTube video, and I wake up and I'm like, I see people talking about this in my Twitter feed, and I'm like, is this a joke? What are people just making the same joke for some reason? It's not a joke. It's a real product. It's a thing. It's the new Nintendo 2DS XL. when we're in an era where the Switch is out and all this stuff is happening, and most people are like, Nintendo, ditch the fucking 3DS. We want you to do Switch things only. And then they do this. The most Nintendo move possible, Bally. What are your first thoughts on the 2DS XL?
Do you remember when I made that prediction that like the announcement of that? What game did I pick? I think I picked Fire Emblem. I said like that was the last 3DS game that they'd like announce or do anything with. That's all the promotion. After that, it's all Switch. They've just like taken that prediction and thrown it back in my face so many times now. It's not even funny. This is probably the worst. Like,
yeah,
let's just go back to the 3DS and do more with that system. It's crazy, isn't it? Maybe it's not crazy.
The thing that we can get into that, but I think the thing that strikes me the most is how old Nintendo this is, in the sense that we have this clean break now with the Switch, where it's it's very simple name, marketing is very smooth, everyone loves it, it's great. Old Nintendo are the kind of company that call a product the new Nintendo 3DS, right? And so let's go through the iterations. We have the 3DS, 3DS XL, the 2DS, and then for each of those there is a new version. So there is the new 3DS, there is the new 3DS XL, and now there is the new 2DS XL. There is no new 2DS though, so the only analog is the XL version of the 2DS to that. So there are 6 versions of these fucking things, Bally.
Right.
There are people, Nintendo fans, who probably can't even get these straight in their head. Like, imagining, like, mothers going to game shops trying to figure out what the fuck to buy. I cannot stand their naming system. The whole new thing just drives me fucking insane. And I know it's because Japan has this obsession with the word new, and they think it's great. It doesn't make sense for the rest of the world at all. Like, that's why they have the new Super Mario Brothers series and all this bollocks. I fucking hate it. But in any case, it's a product which, interestingly enough, they explained, they're like, okay, so this is the sort of thing where it's not the high end, which is the 3DS XL, which is like $200, I believe, and it's not the low end of the kind of kids version, like 2DS.
Basic
it's
2DS.
Positioned in the middle, kind of those two products, as like, hey, this is kind of a sleek thing that doesn't have the 3D.
I think it looks really good.
So a lot of people have been saying that.
I think it's the best looking DS system, 3DS system.
I can disagree heavily with that, Bally. I do not.
Which one do you think's better looking?
It's not necessarily that I think others are that much better looking. It's that when I look at that system, all I see is they took out the top screen and they put an iPhone on top of it instead. Just look at that image and tell me that is not just a phone stuck on the top of that screen.
Yeah, that looks
because the
good.
weird thing, oh my god, no, it doesn't. It looks awful. I think it looks absolutely hideous. Maybe it's literally a curved kind of phone screen that has been stuck on top of the thing itself. Like there's this, it looks like there's going to be this gap, right? When you shut the clamshell, it feels like there's going to be this gap underneath where the previous 3DSs have the kind of solid. What do you call it? The hinge. This one doesn't really have that. I guess it's more central, the hinge, as opposed to being fanned out. But yeah, a lot of people going, oh, it looks so good. It looks like I feel like I might be the odd one out here, but it looks real ugly to me.
I'm with the majority. I think this is the best looking, maybe other than the small new 3DS. I think that's a good looking one with the changeable faceplates, obviously. But
yeah, totally.
I think it looks great. Yeah, if I didn't own as we've said numerous times on the show, we actually really, really like the 3D, so I would never buy a 2DS. But
exactly,
if I never owned one, the form factor is a big selling point for me.
Yeah, and it definitely makes sense when you're talking about that clamshell design. It's very useful, as I've found. Like having the Switch, I really don't want to take my Switch anywhere until I buy a case for it, right? Like, I think the 2DS the 2DS was more of a, hey, this is a very toddlery product, right? You can throw it against a wall and it will be fine. It doesn't really matter if you scratch the screen on a 2DS. But I think this 2DS XL is more of a, hey, like, this is a very entry-level product for the person who's not a kid, right? And I think it starts at $150, probably, £115, £120 or whatever, which is good, especially because the recent uptick in 3DS interest as a result of Pokemon Go and Pokemon Sun and Moon means that there are people searching for these systems still, especially when you have it price-wise half the cost of a Switch, which I think is relevant when you talk about like how many products they have under their umbrella.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great having like a cheaper handheld option on the go moving forwards. Like, will it sell or will it won't it? Well, they can do the 2-tiered approach for now. See what happens in the future.
Yeah, and I wonder how long it's going to be until they completely stop 3DS support. But for this year, at least, it seems like they want to give it another shot in the arm, and there was all these stories end of last year about people finding it very difficult to even get 3DSs. So I don't know. It seems like they just want to inject some new product into the market, and there will be some hardcore Nintendo fans who'll just buy it again because that's what people do. And I feel like as hardcore Nintendo fans as we are, Bally, we're not that level of hey, we're gonna blindly get everything. Best illustrated in the fact that neither of us bought Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because I'm not paying full price for that game again. I've played like 60 hours of it already.
But people are saying some good stuff about that game. But yeah,
I know you're right, and I would love to own it on Switch. Absolutely, in the future, I intend to own that game. But I'm not going. I'm not paying anywhere over 15 quid for it because it's honestly highway robbery for us. And like it makes sense that Nintendo puts it full price for the market because the majority of the market didn't understand the Wii U was a product. They didn't even know it existed. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a brand new game to them. But
right.
That aside, the new Nintendo 2DS XL, what a fucking name, what a fucking thing, what a time we live in, god damn it.
What a troll.
Anyway, it's coming out July 28th in America and Europe, which I guess the Pikmin game's coming out at that same time. And I think
I've not heard good stuff about that game.
No, I mean it's being developed by RSS, so it's not going to hold our breath on that one. But so it seems like they have a kind of a soft launch, as it were. There are some 3DS games coming out, and especially it's interesting because we'll just get to that. But I was just saying it's interesting when they're positioning this as a 2DS because Pikmin, I believe, doesn't have any 3D in it. And it seems like a trend is happening where they are not putting 3D in games anymore if they don't need to. Dragon Quest 8 was the same thing. They didn't do that, and I'm very disappointed by that. But it's a product. It's in the market. We'll see. Maybe we'll get someone on the show who actually has played one, and then we can berate them for buying a fucking new 2DS XL. Anyway, Bally, I ruined your segue.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild DLC. It's happening.
Yes.
It's coming.
So, Nintendo announced the first part of the expansion pass, as they call it, for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which entails many new features, which I'll just run down quickly and then we can kind of talk about them individually. So there's the Trial of the Sword, which is essentially the Cave of Trials. Difference is you start kind of as you have nothing on you as you would at the start of the game, and you basically have to go through some challenge rooms, collecting stuff along the way, and you unlock stuff by doing that. There's this thing called Heroes Path Mode, which is the quote-unquote new map feature that they promised, which is actually incredibly cool. It kind of shows the path that Link has walked over the last 200 hours of gameplay, and it does count if you've already done that stuff. So people who've already played the game, you can see where you went, essentially.
That is cool.
And most people are going to spend less than 200 hours in that game, I imagine. So it's pretty much your entire playtime. So the next thing is the hard mode, which it's a hard mode. We can get into it. I think it's awful, and I think the fact they're charging for this is actually disgusting. But we'll talk about that. Then we have the travel medallion, which is just, hey, you can plop a fast travel point wherever you want. And then there are all these armor sets, which we will dig into as well. So let's start at the top then, Bally, with the Trial of the Sword. This is one of the things I actually am most interested in about this first part of the DLC. When they announced it was going to be a Cave of Trials, I just assumed, hey, it's like Twilight Princess, it's like Wind Waker, you're just going down killing enemies.
It's a bit
the
different.
twist on it, by starting with nothing and allowing you to kind of work your way through and build yourself up over the course of 45 rooms, and having to use all the survival mechanisms and cooking and killing enemies and all that stuff, is really a cool concept, and it's something that does happen in the base game at some point. I don't want to completely talk about it because some people wouldn't have got there, but it's a thing that is being expanded on, I think, here. And it says that you unlock the true power of the Master Sword when you do it, which means basically the Master Sword is powered up and like has the double power the entire time, which is a cool perk, especially once you've beaten the game, because I think it might break the game otherwise. Right. But yeah, how do you feel about this as a proposition? Does it make you any more likely to get the season pass early to play this?
Yeah, I think it will actually, because that sounds like something I'd be keen to try out, like more Breath of the Wild once I've beaten the game, because obviously I've still got so much more of that game to go. It's forcing you to play the game in a different way, and I love it when games do that. It's not even a different way, because other than the spoilery thing we want to talk about, the start of the game, you're very much feeling like you're living off the land a lot more and looking out for weapons to pick up and trying to improve your armor. And then even though I'm not near the end of the game, but I've gotten a lot of armor, and like I feel a lot more accomplished. I feel a lot less survivally, I guess you could like describe it.
Yeah.
Like the forcing
Much
you to go
safer at
back
this
into
point.
survival mode is really good, and I like it when the game does more of that. So this is exactly like what I think a lot of people who enjoyed that one spoilery thing we're not going to mention would like to see. Totally,
yeah. I'm very interested in it, and as someone who, as I have said, my Switch has kind of been sitting around for a month doing nothing, you know, I own the Zelda game, and I know that I would like to play the second DLC pack, which is going to have story in a dungeon and everything. This might kick me over the edge, and I think especially the thing which will kick it over the edge is the hero's path, which, you know, as someone who loves stats and who's someone who laments the lack of the proper activity log in on the Switch, you know, the idea that I can just see a line where I've been for the entirety of my journey is something I am fucking so down with, especially when you can kind of scroll it back and forth and do all that stuff. Like, trying to figure out the exact spots in the world you haven't been is really difficult,
right?
With
There'll
a
be
world
some
that
mountain
size.
range you've never seen. You're like, oh, maybe I should check that out, and I'm sure you'll find like a few Koroks or something like that.
Yeah, so this is definitely a really cool thing to implement. Especially if you're someone who hasn't found all the shrines yet. It gives you the incentive to explore the areas you haven't explored in order to find those last few, right? Because otherwise, you know, you're like me and you're like, well, I have like, 10 left. What am I going to do? It's going to take me forever if I just wander around aimlessly. And this gives you something to focus on, which I think is very good. So next up is a hard mode, which I think is honestly... what they've done is perhaps the most boring, bog-standard thing you can possibly do in a hard mode, which is, hey, we made the levels of the enemy a bit harder, and they regain health, and then there are some in the sky floating on platforms with balloons. That's it. And for me, this is the laziest way to create a hard mode. It's just, hey, let's just change some numbers, and that's it. Like, it really doesn't...
But have they ever done a good hard mode in a Zelda game, though?
Well, so hero mode is the traditional kind of hard option in Zelda, right? And hero mode is interesting because it reduces the ability to get hearts from grassy patches and things like that. Like,
and
it
enemies,
doubles the damage you take.
Yeah.
And it does, things like that. And I think this is even... less than that, unless you are counting the kind of floating in the sky platforms. I don't know, they look a little out of place, and I don't think they really fit in the world that well. But for me, what I was wanting from a hard mode, especially if you're going to charge me for a hard mode, like, this is really something. If it's this bad, if it's just, hey, we're just going to make enemies regain health and also we're just going to knock them up a tier, if that's the level of hard mode you're doing, that should be in the main game. because the level of hard mode I was looking for was, hey, what if resources are far less available? Like, what if you rarely find an apple? Like, what if you find a tree with apples on it, and that is a special thing, right? That is the kind of way that I thought they would go. I hoped they would go with this hard mode, where they're like, okay, it's really scrappy, really survivally. You absolutely have to rely on everything you pick up. Every special weapon you find is unique and interesting, and they're very rare in the world, and getting a good one is a big, big deal. Because eventually I find in Breath of the Wild is you have an overabundance of these things. Like, you're going to shrines and picking up treasure chests, and you can't keep things in your inventory because you already have a bunch of cool shit that you don't need any more of, right? So how I envisioned it was to be more along those lines. And I would have been way more interested had that been the case. I don't know how you feel about this and whether it's as offensive to you as it is to me, but it's really...
It's not quite as offensive to me as it is to you, and I don't know, we've never delved into Zelda hard modes in the past, have we?
And that's traditionally because it hasn't been super interesting. And again, this isn't super interesting, but the bad thing is they're charging you for something that's not super interesting. I never had a problem in the past because they weren't charging me for it.
They are charging you, but to play devil's advocate, because I do agree with you, they are giving you a lot of other stuff with it. But it's bad that they have incorporated this hard mode into that other stuff, even if the other stuff is quite interesting, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the problem is because this pass is including this pack and one coming later, it is hard to judge the exact value of this versus, the story content. So we'll see. And it's maybe one of those things where, this is, much lower on the totem pole priority-wise, but... In any case, the travel medallion seems cool. I mean, I think there are so many fast travel points in this game that it's not really a big deal to have.
That's true, but there are some random blank spots, you could argue, and if you want to place it beside, I don't know, some specific dragonfly you like to collect, you can you can do that.
Yeah, or if you have like a spot you go to mine stuff often that is a really good patch for mining, or there's a location that you can acquire later in the game that actually has a fast travel point near it, but you could have one like right outside there or something, and there are definitely places where I would think about putting one. So it's definitely useful. It's not amazing, but sure. And then we have all the armor sets. So let's just go down them. There's Majora's Mask. There's Midna's helmet. There is a 3-piece Phantom armor suit, and there is also a 3-piece Tingle outfit. All of these have not been given any indication as to what they do so far. So we have no idea what the hell they have any implementation with. I don't know, Midna's helmet might give you access to Wolf Link even if you don't have the amiibo. That's my thought, maybe. That could be something.
Interesting.
I'm thinking Majora's Mask maybe has something to do with the Blood Moon, the Moon Majora's Mask. Maybe wearing it like activates the Blood Moon whenever you want. That could be potential.
Or the
Phantom armor. Maybe just palette swap the Blood Moon for the Moon from Majora's Mask. That would be hilarious. That would be really cool. Phantom armor and Tingle outfit, I don't have much of an idea. Maybe Tingle allows you to glide further because he's all about balloons and stuff. What are your thoughts here, Bally?
What interests me is that the way it's described, like watch for tips on the whereabouts of these chests as you travel around Hyrule. So, like, they might be linked to vague side quests of people saying, "Oh, I saw this," like NPCs. I mean, describing like how you find these chests, like that interests me. Oh, okay, yeah. But, I mean. It looks cool, Link wearing a Majora's Mask. Like, you can't deny as a Zelda fan that doesn't look amazing.
It's awesome.
I wouldn't be surprised if most of the masks do nothing, but it'd be nice if they did do something.
I feel like they have to do some, especially the armor sets, because, when you go through the game, when you acquire a full set, you get a set bonus, right? So I imagine that Tingle and Phantom are both going to have set bonuses of some kind, and I'm curious as to what those are. Like, there has to be some tie into the character, right? Like, the whole Zelda being the spirit in the Phantom, there may be something to do with that. I don't know.
Those Tingle hot pants are pretty hilarious.
Oh yeah, they certainly show stuff. Things
That's
going
certainly
on.
Some stuff.
There's some stuff, yeah, for sure. And then I think the last item on the list is the Korok mask, which, boy, there are a lot of Korok seeds in this game, and you're not going to find them all on your own, probably. So I guess it's useful. It's probably not as useful as something, that would specifically point out on the map, like, more easily. Like, I would like it if they split the map back into segments like it is at the beginning, and you could be like, okay, this area is clear of Korok seeds. I've got all of the ones in here. Yeah. And, that doesn't do that with make it...
The Miiverse in Link Between Worlds.
Yeah. That is definitely something that I think they needed to do. Maybe they'll implement that at an update, but, like, it doesn't make it necessarily that much easier, but at least hey, I've cleaned out this area. I don't need to search here anymore, Yeah. At least it gives you an indication. So that would be useful. But I guess the Korok mask just kind of shaking is also helpful to some degree. So yeah, that's the DLC. How do you feel about it generally, Bally? Is this more than you expected? Is it less? What are your? I don't know.
You have to buy it all together, don't you?
Yeah, there's no individual stuff.
I mean, I would have happily left most of all of the stuff we've just mentioned, to be honest. I just want extra world and dungeon and whatever is promised in DLC Pack 2. But
yeah,
there you go. If I have to buy it all, I have to buy it all. It's not great, but there's some quirky stuff in there that I'm sure will entertain me once I've beaten the game. So
yeah,
it's good.
And if we do have to buy it all, and they don't split it up by the end of the year, I might as well just buy it now, and then I get access to this stuff, right? Which is it's a shitty thing.
How annoyed will you be if you buy it now all together and then they split it at the end of the year? You're like, well, what was the point of that?
Exactly, that's the problem. But again, as we've said, like, I'm kind of lacking for content on my Switch right now, so that Trial of the Sword is one thing that I might be interested in doing. So anyway, that's that. And then the other piece of news, which dropped very, very recently, today in fact, as we're recording this, Nintendo announced that E3 plans what they're going to be doing for the Electronic Triple on June 13th. And
Nintendo on E3 this year, MBZ.
Oh, they're never at E3, are they?
They're not E3.
The thing that really fucking annoys me every year, like, either Kotaku or Polygon or some other fucking site will be like, Nintendo skips E3 yet again. It's like, you fucking know. Stop spreading misinformation. You fucking clickbaity headlines because no one wants to read your website anymore. Anyway.
Because Nintendo fans are reading that, knowing that digital events exist, thinking that they've pulled out of the digital event. It's just after that pure click. It's not
fucking stupid shit. It's the state of games journalism these days. All these sites are dying because YouTube exists, and it sucks. But, that's what they've got to do to survive. It's terrible. Anyway, so Nintendo are at E3, and this is what they're doing. They have a thing called Nintendo Spotlight, which is a different name to what they've called it before. They usually call the video presentation a digital event, and it's now called a Spotlight. It is focusing exclusively on Switch games, no 3DS stuff as far as this stuff says, focusing on stuff in 2017, and they name check Super Mario Odyssey. So let's just start with this then, Bally. It's standard time, the Tuesday, June 13th, the 9 a.m. slot. We know it, we love it. What are your expectations here? Do you think that... Because a lot of people going back and forth on NeoGAF and on Twitter saying, like, well, they've said they're looking at 2017, so we're not going to hear anything about next year. But what they've really said is that they're focusing on 2017. So I think that there's definitely a chance they talk about stuff coming in later times, just not, like, heavily going into it.
They won't be able to resist not doing, like, a next year kicker at the end or something that just... Some big mic drop that you just kind of... You're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Or like, you're right. The language is strange where they're reducing they're tempering your expectations, perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
I think the vast majority is going to be spent on Mario Odyssey, and that's obviously just a huge game for them. So it's difficult to say. I'm intrigued by the fact that, Like, the last 3 years, haven't we always had like the Smash Brothers tournament or the Nintendo World Championship? Is this the first year where they've not done something on the side, or is that yet to come? Do you think?
Well, they've said we'll get to that announcement.
Okay, I've missed it. Okay, but yeah, on the event itself, I think it is going to obviously focus on 2017, and that is fantastic. Like, there's a brand new system out. That's what you want to hear about, but I can't see them it's too tempting to not mention something for Beyond 2017, surely, because there's that window between the start of 2018 and E3 next year. So this is a good time to perhaps announce something for then, at least.
Yeah, that doesn't preclude them from just doing Nintendo Directs whenever, because we have to remember Nintendo, as they've been controlling the message in these last 5-6 years, have not necessarily blown their load at an E3. Like, they do save stuff for Directs, so you could say they're gonna wait until the end of this year and then maybe use the Game Awards to some degree to help something, or even just do a Direct in January. But yeah, it's weird. I keep going back to this interview that Reggie had, or this quote that keeps coming up about, people asking Reggie about, where's Mother 3? Where is Metroid? Where are all these things? Virtual Console? What's all this stuff? And Reggie said, talk to me again in a year and we'll see how you feel. And that quote says to me that they have stuff popping. Like, things are in the oven and things are going to be said. So, come next March, when it's the 1 year anniversary of the Switch, we should have heard about these potential things that Reggie is mentioning.
That question after a year, though.
Yeah, exactly. But no one remembers. I'm the kind of nerd who remembers these fucking random interviews.
Reggie, you said.
Yeah, exactly. So the one issue I have is that I feel like a lot of the potential quote unquote surprises we already know. Like, that Rabbids Mario thing, all but confirmed at this point. You have the Pokemon Stars rumor, which is like, no duh, they're going to do that. So, like, these are kind of tentpole things that could be surprises for people at E3, but because of the leak machine, people have already, spat them out there. So I do wonder if they won't get as big of a punch as they would like because of that stuff already being known to the hardcore audience. What I'm saying is we need a Metroid to kick us in the face.
Oh yeah, obviously. Come on. Don't be
yeah. And I doubt that would be a 2017 thing, which is why I'm saying,
Yeah,
I think if they do that,
we broadly know everything in 2017. Like, it's interesting to see how many surprises there will be for 2017.
Yeah, I doubt that many. But next up is Nintendo Treehouse, which has been successful for going on 3 years now, 4 years. It might be the fourth year they've done it.
Who needs journalists anyway?
Oh god, I mean, I do, because I actually like hearing honest opinions. I don't like being fed marketing bullshit. But I don't really count the Treehouse as marketing bullshit. It's very shilly, of course, it has to be. But the thing I do like about it is, it's the one time at E3 where someone sits down and is like, hey, let me show you this video game. Because so much of E3 is pomp and circumstance and press conferences. And especially when you look at Sony and Microsoft stages, and even, Ubisoft, EA, half that shit is CG bollocks, right? None of it is actually digging into the video game. And the thing I love about Treehouse is, let's sit down for 30 minutes and show you this game, right? And sure, they're selling it to you, but you can also make that judgment yourself. You can watch this gameplay and say, does this look appealing to me? And that, I think, is very valuable. And what they've also said is that they're showing Switch and 3DS games during Treehouse. So if they have any 3DS announcements to make, I imagine those would happen during the course of the Treehouse streams, and they'd be like, okay, so this is a brand new game we're going to reveal on the Treehouse, because they did that last year with Ever Oasis, and they've done it in years before. So I think that any 3DS announcements will be kind of designated there. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Treehouse people play some Super Mario Odyssey, like getting a better idea of the structure of that game and all that stuff. Always look forward to sitting and watching that. Bally, how do you think that the Treehouse is something that is, because every year Nintendo changes their approach. Treehouse seems to be that one thing that is this commonality throughout. I don't know how you feel about it.
I completely agree with you. It is shilly and it makes you cringe, but you're right. It's separate to a press conference where you see like a snippet of a game. It's actually like, right, we're some of the people who worked on this game in most cases, and we're going to sit down and show you this game slowly and explain it to you. And that's sort of the experience that you would, like, we've been to Gamescom. That's like what the developer will do with you there and then on like a show floor. So
sure,
by streaming it live online and them saying this is what this aspect of this game does, etc., etc., and taking you through it gradually over a long period of time is really valuable. Obviously, it's cutting out the journalist and whatever, and that's bad. But as long as they make it clear what it is, and sometimes I'm skeptical that they do make it clear what it is, but what it is actually really good for showing long form gaming in a situation where E3, like you said, the pomp and show, where, and I think Microsoft and Sony may be a bit more guilty than Nintendo in many situations where they're
100% more guilty. I don't think it's even a question that.
Sorry?
I think they're 100% more guilty.
Right,
I don't think it's a question at all. Nintendo show way more gameplay in their digital event or whatever than Sony or Microsoft do.
CGI trailers and
right, and a lot of it is to do with the fact that the kind of games that are being produced for those platforms are far more. Hey, this is this gritty, realistic like action thing, so we need to have this real CG stuff going on. Whereas it just doesn't work for most of Nintendo's games, honestly. So I think that's why they forego it most of the time.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Treehouse is always good fun. And then finally, as you were asking about tournament stuff, so on the 13th and 14th, they're going to have a Splatoon 2 tournament and also an ARMS tournament. So ARMS is coming out at the end of that week, and Splatoon 2 will be out in a month after E3. So there's going to be tournaments going on, and I wonder if that's going to be a separate stream from the Treehouse. Or what, but they're not. It doesn't look like they're doing like a big arena or anything. It seems like it's going to be from Nintendo's E3 booth, I'm interested to see how that works.
A bit more low key then.
Yeah, a little bit more low key, but still showing off those games. Yeah, as an additional thing.
That's cool though. I think we'll know by the end of that whether we're gonna get ARMS or not.
ARMS comes out that week. Like E3 ends and ARMS is out on the Friday, so it's one of those things where I'm, as I'm looking at the library and I'm thinking, what, ARMS has been, it's been looking more and more interesting to me the more I see it. So I feel like I might just jump on board with that, especially if our buddy old pal Ali T, who intends to pick up a Switch, I think on the day that ARMS comes out, I suggested to him, hey, this game's coming out, you should maybe get it, and then we can play together.
Well, he's got to beat Zelda in a weekend first, that's his thing.
Obviously, yeah. I really, I look forward to hearing from him about how he does with Zelda. We'll see. But that pretty much wraps things up for the E3 stuff. You looking forward to E3, Bally? Of course, it's a stupid question. We always do. But, anything
last
in particular?
Year was maybe a bit of a... the rug was taken from beneath our excitement a bit, where they said, we're doing nothing but Zelda. And we thought, well, that's not great. But then we saw Zelda and we're like, we forgive you. It was fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm liking that they're maybe tempering expectations a bit, but I'm still convinced there'll be something beyond 2017 that excites everyone. And like a Mario game coming out this year, like how much more excited do you need to be? Like that's going to be a huge chunk of it, and that's probably what I'm the most excited about.
Yeah, it's Galaxy and Galaxy 2 are two of the best games Nintendo have ever made. So a proper follow up to that, but also being in the mold of a 64 and Sunshine is, look, we've said it before. EAD Tokyo have not put a foot wrong. I think they are perhaps the best developer in the industry. So, I have trust with them with my life. So I look forward to it. But, I will say, in recent years, I have always tempered my expectations with E3. And that's mainly because when they disappoint, feels real bad when there's not good stuff going on, especially like the Star Fox Zero year was real rough. Ugh. It was not good. I don't think Nintendo have had a like kick it out the stadium, hit out the stadium, whatever baseball terms you use, fucking home run since
E3.
I don't know. I'm bad at sports analogies, Bally. I don't think they've had a home run since 2014, which was the year they revealed Splatoon, and they had a bunch of other great stuff that year. If we're talking about traditional E3, so I don't think last year was a very traditional E3 for Nintendo with just Zelda. So I think that if they want to reach heights, that's what they're gunning for. But we'll see. We'll see if they get there. Anyway, that's going to wrap us up for the show. Thanks, everyone, for listening. It's been fun talking with you, chatting again about Nintendo. I hope you enjoy. You can find us in various places across the internet. Bally, where can you be found?
Please find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. You should also check out the podcast Twitter, which of course is at TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. That's the best place to go to see all of our videos that are going up on our YouTube channel, and to see when the podcast comes out and like our thoughts on things. And yeah, check us out on Twitter. That's where to go.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Lordnbz. And yeah, you can check that YouTube channel out by going to youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife. Little break in content going on right now because I'm busy with a lot of stuff. You're busy with a lot of stuff. We haven't had the time to record some things.
The podcast always stays strong.
Yeah, the podcast will, it's the one constant in our life. But yeah, when we're less busy, things will start kicking into gear again on that channel. So do give it a check. Also, you can email us at our email address, which, as we've said, do need some emails for. E3 is coming up. If you have some predictions and things, maybe send those in. That'll be cool. And you can send those to Bally.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Always appreciate hearing from new listeners, and that's a good thing to do. It's always nice to know that different people are hearing the show. You can find us in many places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher. You can download us in any podcast app you have available to you. And hey, while you're at it, why don't you review us on the iTunes store? That'd be nice. We have some nice reviews from many kind people, but we always need more. It's an ever-expanding, ever-growing economy of podcasts. So if you would like to tell us that you like us, we'd like you to tell us that you like us. That'd be nice.
Wow. See what you did there.
Yeah. And with that, Bally, I think we're closing out. Any last thoughts before we scoot off?
I'm just pumped about E3. It's coming. It's come around pretty quick, I feel, this time.
It's
and
down the road.
Finally, it's come when there's been a new console on offer, which is always exciting.
Very exciting. So we look forward to that, and we hope you will join us for the festivities. But until then, we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for listening, and goodbye. The musical interludes used on today's show were Lazy Daydream from Flower, copyright That Game Company 2009, and Mountain Ghost Town from Severed, copyright Drinkbox Studios 2016.